Welcome to Gateway to the Gallery. I'm your host, Mark Stein. I'm joined here in the Sordoni Art Gallery at Wilkes University by Gallery Director Heather Sienkiewicz. Welcome, Heather, and thank you for being with us. Gateway to the Gallery is a show that highlights the art and artists on exhibition here at the Sordoni Gallery. The featured exhibition for today's show is Solid Gone, an exhibition of cast iron, and the vision of artist and curator Ben Woodison. So let's start, Heather, by talking a little bit about the exhibition in general and why you chose it as a featured exhibit here at the Sordoni.
Of course. We were a lucky part of the recent International Contemporary Cast Iron Conference that took place in Scranton in the beginning of June. So as part of that, it was an international demonstration of artists who were doing live cast iron pouring and featuring their work throughout galleries in our region. So we were part of those exhibitions. There were 28 that were going on while those artists were here.
That's fantastic. When I think about an art exhibition, I don't often think about cast iron.
Yeah.
Is cast iron a popular medium? And as I look around the gallery here, there are a number of artists that are on display here. How popular is that as a medium?
Yeah, you know, we probably have seen cast iron a little bit more in the public arena. So many of our public monuments are cast iron. But we're now seeing artists in this sort of more contemporary vein that are taking it into the gallery. And here in our gallery, we're definitely seeing artists that are pushing the limits of cast iron.
Fantastic. And we're going to take a look at some of those pieces in just a few minutes. But let's focus a little bit on the artist and curator of the exhibit, Ben Woodison. I know that you had an opportunity to work fairly closely with Ben, and I was wondering what that was like. And also, if you could tell us a little bit about what a curator does in terms of bringing an exhibit like this together.
Sure. Well, I think a good place to start is what they actually do. A curator will actually come up with the idea of what the show should be. So essentially create an abstract or a theory that they're looking to explore during the show. So Ben, who is an artist himself, is somebody who's known for really pushing the limits in cast iron. And he had a number of colleagues and that's where he began when he put this show together. He knew that there were a number of other artists out there that are pushing the limits. So in coming up with that idea, knowing that there are still a few, he put a call out to artists around the world to submit their work and be part of this exhibition. So then he went through and selected what would be in the show. So for him, it's actually a lot of fun because he's in this new space and really imagining how this work would I guess, play out here. But also it's challenging because this isn't necessarily his space. He had actually never been here before we installed. So, you know, it's kind of fun to work with somebody on a more conceptual level and help make their vision realized.
Wonderful. And you mentioned both national and international.
Yeah.
From what areas and places are the artists that we can see here from?
Oh, yeah. Well, Ben is from the UK. He was living in London, but actually came here to work with us from Roswell, New Mexico. So he gets around a bit. He's now in Mexico City. We have artists from Ireland, Germany. We have artists from the US and Canada as well.
Wow. So lots of representation here from really around the world.
Yeah, it's pretty fun.
That's fantastic. What was it like working with Ben directly as you put this show together?
Well, he has a lot of energy, so he makes the job really fun. He is somebody who I think I'd often get an email from him saying, "What do you think of?" And you never know what's going to come because you know he's here to push limits. So often when he came to me at one point, he says, "What do you think about a self-misting sculpture?" I was like, "Oh God." But you know, it's great to work with somebody who really wants to push the limits and really bring to our community things that aren't expected when you think of cast iron. Typically, you think of cast iron as lumps of metal, and he was thinking beyond that.
Fantastic. Well, speaking of pushing the limits, what I'd like to do is go through a selection of the different pieces that are on show here, and maybe have you talk about each one and take a look at each one.
Yeah.
So let's start with something called Lines by George Beasley.
Yes.
And this is I would say almost Calder-esque, kind of like a mobile or something like that is what I think of when I see this. And I'm wondering how it was made and what your thoughts on the piece are.
Oh gosh, yeah. So, one thing that's really big in the cast iron or the contemporary cast iron community are cast iron performances. So this is a result of a performance that Beazley did in Germany. He was actually pouring cast iron into hollowed out bamboo. And the lines that we see behind us here are essentially those lines suspended in space. So the idea is that they were going to be very fluid and have a lot of movement to them. And every time it's installed, it's a little bit different.
Yeah, we're just seeing some images of Beazley actually doing the pouring. And I think it's amazing that he thought of this concept of pouring molten metal into bamboo.
Yeah, I know. And, I think what's really cool about Beazley, too, a little fun fact, he was Ben's teacher.
Oh, interesting.
Isn't that cool?
That's very
So
neat.
you see where he's getting it from. But, like this whole idea of pushing the limits, I mean, he was getting that from the foundation of his education.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Now, I mentioned that it's almost like a mobile.
Oh, yeah.
And when I look at it here in the gallery, it's hanging, I think, from fishing line or something like that. And one of the first things I thought of was, is it the same every place it's exhibited? Because it looks like it would be very difficult to put up the same way twice.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It is different in every place. He did come on site and actually worked on how it was going to be displayed here. It took probably about 6 hours to get it up. So he's really, really thinks about the nuances of the piece and how it's really going to be conveyed in the space. But in some spaces, he also has it more against the wall, where it actually can mark the wall, and it's meant to be as this kinetic drawing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Wonderful. Well, I think that particular piece really captures you when you walk into the gallery. I think that's really neat. All right, let's move on to the second artist that we're going to talk about, and that is Roberto Visani.
Mm-hmm.
And he does something, or did a piece called Stack.
Yeah.
And I gather it is iron cast around weapons confiscated by law enforcement officers.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that and your thoughts on that.
Yeah. Well, he is really looking to display this in public areas, so outside of like courthouses and police stations and things like that.
So it's kind of a political statement.
It definitely is. It's meant to, bring up a discussion and dialogue around gun control. So no matter what side of the fence, it's kind of bringing people together to speak about that.
Uh-huh.
But to me, when I first saw it, I was thinking it was this sort of smaller piece that was maybe cast from guns, but the molds were toys. But no, the molds were made around guns, and they were melted down to actually create the sculpture. So, it's deceiving when you see it in photos at first.
Yeah, it's interesting because it looks almost like a house of cards.
Oh, yeah.
But then when you get closer to it and you look inside, you can actually see the impressions of the guns on the inside, and different types of guns, including assault weapons and so on, that I think really, pique people's interest in terms of that gun debate.
Oh, you're absolutely right about that. I mean, there's so much that's happening in the headlines of our newspapers around this issue, and I think it's really great to have artists working in this way to bring up that kind of dialogue. So I'm thrilled to have it part of the show.
Fantastic. Do you know anything about how he made it? Did he just lay the guns down and then pour molten metal over top of the guns and then break the cast?
It was probably a sand mold of the guns themselves, and then actually kind of doing more of like a slip casting over top of that. So laying in the molten metal over top of the mold, so where it looks slumped in.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
And as we look at it, it's probably about 6 or maybe almost 7 feet tall.
Yeah,
in that
about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So the size is pretty impressive, and probably something you'd more frequently think you'd see outside rather than inside.
Oh, absolutely.
So when you bring it down to scale, it's really an impressive
Very much so.
piece.
And what's wonderful is that it looks quite precarious, but it's so well crafted that it hasn't moved an inch.
That's good. I wondered that when I walked by.
Because that makes me nervous sometimes as somebody who oversees a space like this.
I completely understand. Wonderful. Any other thoughts on Stack?
Oh no, I think it's really fabulous to have a piece like this in this show. I mean, the topics just are so far ranging, so we can go to very contemporary headlines to even more metaphysical kind of topics. So, it's been a lot of fun.
That's great. Have you gotten any reactions from any of the people who have come to the gallery with regard to that particular piece?
I think they're mostly impressed that it's melted down from guns. When they realize that, they realize how powerful it is. That fact really hits them hard.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, let's move on to our next piece that we're featuring today, and that is by Alan McGee. It's called Subconscious Labor, Conscious Growth.
Yeah.
And my understanding is this is your favorite piece in this particular exhibition.
Yes.
And that word is out there. So this is essentially fingernails, but cast in iron.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about the piece and tell us why it's your favorite piece.
Sure. Well, his work in general is about labor, so even beyond the piece that's here, he's always thinking about the labor of our day-to-day lives, so he'll do a lot of like mindless work, like sharpening a pencil for on and on and on and on forever, or washing, so he does these little menial tasks, but really makes a statement with the tasks that he's creating. So this is cast fingernails. So he cast his own fingernails in cast iron. It is a very, very difficult piece. So it's one of the more accomplished pieces in the show, which is funny because it's very unassuming and small. And that is part of the reason why it's actually so special. Cast iron is typically done on such a large scale because it fits the medium. To cast metal so small, especially iron, it has like a freeze point when you get into the actual molding it, that it freezes up in the mold and you can't do really delicate things. So this is showing a real mastery of like really understanding what the medium can do and how he can kind of push his knowledge, and he did have some help, but how he can push his knowledge to be able to make it work. So the result of what's in the show is from the second time that he tried to do it. So he actually did it, made a mold of his fingernails, didn't work the first time, so had to grow his nails out again so he could make another mold, because once you do these molds, they're once and done and you toss them. So made another mold, and they were able to get the temperature of the iron to the proper temperatures where it will flow and fill the mold.
That's fantastic. A lot of the debate as we were preparing for the show among the crew here was, how did he actually do that? So he actually put those into sand,
Yeah.
and then basically attempted to flow that metal into where the
Yeah.
fingernails were in the sand. It's kind of like a lost wax type of
Very,
process
very
type of
similar to that, which is funny because I even thought about like, well, why didn't they just do a lost wax centrifugal casting for it? So, but I think it all comes down to the venting, getting the right channels in there, and getting the metal to the right temperature so it doesn't get too hot where it pits or too cold where it freezes.
So this is essentially a demonstration of technique and mastery of the molding process.
Oh,
and
yeah.
the art process.
It's really impressive.
Wonderful. Well, now I understand why it is your favorite
Yeah.
in the entire exhibition. It's great. All right, let's move on to our next piece, and that is by Kelly Ludeking, and it is called She. And this is cast iron and glass. And why don't I let you kind of take it away and tell us a little bit about what it's about and what it means.
Yeah. Well, this piece is a little bit more formal. So it's a little bit what you would, I guess, see as cast iron. So it's more stagnant, it sits on a pedestal, a lot like many sculptures do, and this was really kind of playing around like with the formal aspects of both a woman's figure, but also just what she's made of, so it's this idea of some of it is very brittle and some of it's very, very strong. And what is really great about it is that it's deceiving what's what. So the stronger medium in this piece is the actual glass, and what's brittle and weak is the iron.
Interesting.
And you would think it's flip-flopped.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. That's
But
very interesting.
I know, right?
And makes a statement about the toughness of women
Exactly,
sometimes
exactly.
and perseverance.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Excellent, excellent. Any reactions on that from people who have gone through?
No. I think many who have come through are just excited to see the combination of the two. One thing about it, we just talked about Mickey and the technical expertise he had.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing kind of goes with Kelly. He really had to think about how the two mediums are going to combine and not break down. They have different melting temperatures, they have different heats they can withstand. So he had to come to it first with the iron piece and then blow the glass into it without melting the iron. So it's pretty impressive.
That is very impressive.
Yeah.
And creating something in which, as we see, the exterior iron is fragile in
Yeah.
some way, more fragile than glass, is an amazing dichotomy that
I think
they
so,
were
too.
able to, or he was able to create that.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful. Next up, we have attraction of industrial waste. And that's interesting. And I'm going to attempt to say the name of the artist. You can correct me. John, and I'll let you handle the last name.
Yeah, Jaw Runner.
Yes,
Yeah.
wonderful,
Yeah.
excellent. Tell me a little bit about this artist, and then let's talk a little bit about the sculpture attraction of industrial waste.
Yeah, I mean, it's been super fun because this piece is so opposite the lump of metal. So Jaw Runner is playing around with it's a kinetic sculpture, works in these very simplified pieces. And it looks to kind of create these building blocks to kind of work around in their work. So with this piece, it's came to me in pieces. And of course, Ben, who was here that day, the curator, putting everything together, he said he was giving us all jobs to do, and he's like, Heather, you're going to take on this one. I was like, oh, great. So he was very, very adamant that I did not look at the source image that Jaw Runner had sent to us, so I was like, oh gosh. But he really wanted to make a point that with Jaw Runner's work, it can be reimagined infinite amount of ways. And with that piece, it took me 2 hours to build that. But as I built it,
I'm impressed, believe me.
He kept coming by and he'd say, more precarious, more precarious. So I was trying to make it so it looked like it could topple over, but the magnets are so strong that there's no way it will do that. They also demagnetized my ID that day. So they're that strong.
That's great. I'm fascinated that the artist would say, go ahead and set it up.
I know.
And that's a piece, and his art piece, even though you've created it in a manner of your own.
Yeah.
Is that unusual, or is that common?
Some artists really like to kind of give it up to chance, see what happens. And I think some artists also embrace this idea that we can participate and reimagine things. Not every artist, a lot of artists do have a very clear vision and it's got to be that, but some really do enjoy to see how their work is going to be interpreted and presented.
I think that's interesting because as I think about it, I often think about the artist who's fanatical about their piece being exactly the same every single time. And I think it's valuable to know that there are artists out there that are interested in how others interpret their work, not just from the takeaway, but also how they might put that work together.
It's so true. And that's a lot of fun because you end up almost collaborating with them in a way,
Which is neat. They bring you into the art piece in a way that goes beyond just walking past.
It's so true. Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And this changes every exhibition.
Yeah.
Right? So each time this is shown, it's going to be different, very much like the Beasley lines that we had talked about a little bit earlier.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So I've been very sure to document and send it back so they can see.
Great. That's great. So this is called Attraction of Industrial Waste. Is the artist trying to convey something with that? I'm sure they are, but can you
I
think
it's meant to be a play on what the magnets do, and also the cast pieces that are in the sculpture themselves were casted vent lines from another mold.
Okay. All right.
So
Interesting.
it's that attractive of that industrial waste right there.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Good. Well, that explains it.
Yeah.
And let's move on to the last piece of art that we're featuring today in the show, and that is by Kristen Tordella Williams, and it's called Corruption.
Yeah.
And I would argue, at least from my perspective, this is one of the most interesting pieces, I think, in the show. And it's actually a stack of handmade cotton, recycled congressional records with cast iron on top that has cockroaches cast on the top. So, and on top of all of that, there's a sprayer that sprays water on it. So, kind of tell us how this all may have come about and what all this means.
Yeah. So Kristen is both a sculptor and a paper maker. So with this piece, we see like those two worlds intersect for her. And the idea is that, we have this handmade paper made from the congressional records, and that we can really essentially like build all of these laws and create all these actions within our government, but and we can argue over them and we can feel strongly about them, but essentially we're going to break down and we won't necessarily always be here. But who will be? Cockroaches.
That's right.
So the idea is that the mister is going to break down the paper, and as this is displayed over and over and over again, that stack is going to diminish. So we'll see the effects of the rust as it goes down the tower, and the tower will get smaller and smaller until it's just the cockroaches in the end.
Oh, isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
They always say that after a nuclear explosion, the only thing left will be the cockroaches, right?
So and she subscribes to that idea.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
And pretty timely, I think, with regard to everything that's going on around Congress and president and so on.
Oh gosh, absolutely. Yeah.
Wonderful.
And I think no matter what side of the aisle you are, I think people can still feel strongly about the argument between the two sides.
Great. So now that will be shown at other galleries and so on. And if we see it 6 months or a year or 2 years from now, it's going to be much different, I presume, than what it currently is.
Yes, it will always evolve. Yeah.
Wonderful. Wonderful. I think that's fantastic. I think we've covered the key pieces of art here. Is there anything else you want to add about the show in general or about the gallery as we close things out for today?
Yeah, I mean, I think overall in this exhibition, it really was about pushing limits, So I think it's exciting to see. I mean, we just spotlit just a few today, but there are so many other artists that are featured in the show that are approaching the medium in a way that we wouldn't necessarily expect. So we're always, with every exhibition, we try to put out a catalog, and with Solid Gone we did so. And our catalog is always available on our website. So that's always possible to kind of, if you don't get to see the show, you do still get to see some of the work that was involved in that. And I think also I wanted to mention, I was really thrilled to be working with the International Conference of Cast Iron Art. It was a lot of fun to have so many artists from around the world right here in Wilkes-Barre, right here at the Sordoni Gallery, connecting, talking about their work, really in this exciting dialogue of their medium and everything that they were discussing at the conference. It's really, really awesome.
Wonderful. And I'm going to mention how people can get in contact with the Sordoni in just a moment or two, but I just want to point out that everything here is free. Am I correct?
Yeah. We do we don't have an entrance fee. Any of our events, such as guest lectures, symposiums, demonstrations, they're all free. So it's a matter of just getting to know what our schedule is and showing up. We have some really cool stuff that gives you access to artists in a way that you wouldn't necessarily get on the internet or on social media or whatever. Like you could certainly connect with an artist and have a real live conversation here.
That's fantastic. Well, Heather Sienkiewicz, thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for your expertise in terms of walking us through each one of these selected pieces from the Solid Gone exhibit here at the Sordoni Art Gallery at Wilkes University. The gallery is located at 141 South Main Street, Wilkes-Barre, and is open Tuesday through Friday from 10 to 5, 10 to 7 on Thursdays, and noon to 5 on Saturday and Sunday. For more information, call 408-4325 or visit Sordoni Art Gallery. That's www.wilkes.edu/Sordoni Art Gallery on the internet. And thank you for being with us. We're glad you joined us, and we'll see you next time.